Okay, let's get a good grasp on what I mean by learning personality. Let's define it so we understand it and how that term is used in the educational world so we don't get confused. So I have my notes over here. So let me give you this in a nutshell and then I'll expand on it. And it's the reason why I also use the word personality and not style like so many educational websites do, because that can be confusing. But personality encompasses likes, dislikes, our temperament, our mood. It's so much more. So it's the preferred way that a child likes to learn or a person likes to learn. It's the way they prefer to take in information, and it's the way they prefer to have output or to show you. Have you been to a demonstration before where a person gets up there and they have chart after chart of all these visuals? And you may think to yourself, can't I just read this in a book and find out? Probably you could. But because this person teaches this way and this is their learning style or personality, they have brought charts. There could be another person that perhaps stands up and performs a skit. And you're thinking, what is this? If they'll just show me a chart about what they're talking about, I don't have to have them acting all out and all this drama. There's a lot to understand. I'm excited to tell you about it. I'm just showing you some of the differences in how what you're learning in this workshop. I have even been told by students it helps them in other relationships. Okay, so back to what I'm talking about. The personality is a preferred way to learn, the way we want to take in information, and the way that children want to demonstrate it. Okay, not any of the 4 major personalities, not any of them have a sign of being more intelligent or less intelligent than the others. And all 4 personality traits include children that could have learning issues. They could be any of these personalities, and they could have learning issues with them all or not any. And here's the other point that I've learned. Now, some things I've read numerous books about how the brain works, the learning styles, and it wasn't very helpful for them to say, oh, well, it emerges by about 21 years of age. I'm thinking, whoa, I should be finished homeschooling by then. So that's not helpful. And while it's true in a concrete sense, probably by the age of 21, it's pretty firm. Really, my experience has been that by the age of 9 or 10, it emerges and you can tell. Until that time, if you have a child that is under the age of 9 or 10, just a rule of thumb, they're usually all one type of personality. That's energetic Eddie. And we're going to talk about that too, because I've named all these different personalities to help you understand and put a mental picture in your mind. Now, this doesn't mean this workshop won't be helpful, because it will. Because after they change from that active energetic stage, another type of learning emerges. And I want you to be able to identify it by what they're doing and the subjects that they like. So I just wanted to give you a rule of thumb. And another thing I want to cover here too before we go on, and that is there's so much science behind the type of people that we can be, our personalities, our brains. It is really complex. And this workshop is not intended to put anybody in a box. We're far from that as homeschool educators. But for goodness gracious, we have got to have a way when our kids are aggravating us and we're aggravating them, we have got to have some way to gauge or measure what they like to learn. And that's what I'm doing in this workshop. There's a lot of science you can read behind it. So we're not trying to just nail someone down, because sometimes all these things, I mentioned them in another workshop, when all these things don't fit in this particular box, you think, well, that's not me, or I don't fit any of these. There's 4 general ones. And for the most part, we all fit one of them. So one of the learning personalities will be dominant, and then we'll have a second one that follows closely behind it. But by the time you finish this workshop, it shouldn't be, oh, well, I follow to all 4, because it's not really, you don't. You need to really identify with one as a dominant, realizing you probably may not check all the checklists that I made for you, but it pretty well gives you a starting point for you and your children. Okay? So keep all that in mind. That's also a lot of what I've learned through the past 20 years, trying to boil it down and nail it down for you so you have a starting place. So these are rules of thumbs to understand. It's not exact science. You know, there's just no way. We're all very different. But instead of just saying, oh, we don't have a starting point, I'm giving you a starting point here. Okay, here's one thing I want you to also understand about the learning personality. And that is, it is a default setting for us, if you will. Think about that. If you buy a toaster, can you use it as a blender? I know, silly. It's a toaster. It was intended for this use. That's its default setting. That's the way it comes wired, and we're going to use it to its full potential to blend this up really good. Same way with the toaster. We're going to use that toaster for what we need. That's what I want you to understand. Sure, we're affected and we change, and our children can be affected and change by our environment. You know, our genes affect us, but our environment affects us. And also our children want to please us. So sometimes they'll say things to us when we ask them questions just to please us. But if they didn't have any of those encumbrances or limitations, you might get some different feedback from them. So what I want you to understand is our learning personality is a default setting that we want to work with. Sure, you can try to change it. How good do you think that will be, changing something from its intended use? See, that's what happens. Sometimes we try to change it from what its strengths and weaknesses are to something else, and it just doesn't work. And that's what I want you to understand about learning personalities. Now, let me give you a little bit of complex information because, like I said, I want to arm you if you want to dig into this topic more. Learning modalities is often used interchangeably with the term learning styles in the educational world, but they are always talking about three different ways of taking in information. Learning modalities means modes, and it is the way that the body takes in information. So basically there are three. They take it in auditory, they take it in through touch, and they take it in through sight. Now, but here's my problem with that. When I started researching, they left off two of the other senses. And the educational world would think, oh, well, you're silly for saying that. But think about it. They left off taste and they left off smell. So really, there's not even three. Now, why do we say taste and smell? You and I both know that we can teach science and we can teach history. We can even teach literature by baking something, measuring it. They can smell it. They can taste it. Really, there's not just three learning styles like the educational world says. There's five. Of course, they have to teach the three because there's no way they could do these other things that we do in our homeschool. But see, that's why I even have a problem with that. But just so you know, when they say learning styles, they're talking about modalities. I'm not talking about that in this workshop. I'm not talking about something you can find online anywhere. No. I'm talking about learning personalities, and it works with learning modalities and these modes, or this way, this information, the way that we take it in. Yes, some of us are visual, some of us are auditory, some of us are hands-on. And really, when we're teaching a child, we want to train the brain to take in information through all of these modalities. And why? Well, you know, my kids do grow up, and they did. And when they take classes at college, the professor's not going to say, okay, I'm just going to give you all this information through your strongest learning modality, through visual. No, he may say, here, listen to all these workshops I have. And the people that are visual are going to be like, oh, I can't believe he did that. They just close their eyes. I can't believe he did that. It sounds like blah, blah, blah. But see, if we trained our child to take in information through all five senses, through all five of them, then we really empower them to be able to have several ways to understand information. Okay, so I have a handout for you on that, but I just want to make it clear that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about 4 personalities that work with the learning modalities, which is the reason why I didn't say learning style, because the educational world wants to say it's auditory and it's sight and it's touch, and there, your kids fit in that. And really, they could fit into 5 of them. Plus, the personality really helps you to understand their likes, their dislikes, their temperaments, their moods, and the subjects that they like. Okay, a recap. You and your child are not going to be all 4, even though you may see a few characteristics that are the same, but there's going to be one that should be dominant. There's going to be a second one that will follow closely behind that, a first one and then a second one. Also, I'm going to give you a way to find out from your child without asking them, because they don't know. I'm going to give you a few ways to find out what your child's learning style and learning personality is. You probably already have an idea of what their learning style is, the way they like to take in information. And if you don't, the handout will help you as well with that. And the next thing to remember, there's not one that's more intelligent than the other. We need all kinds of different personalities in our world. All kinds of personalities rock this world and are successful. And also each personality, learning personality, can have a child that struggles with learning issues, but helping to understand their personality will help you to strengthen what their good points are and to shore up where they're weak at. Okay, so let's dive in to each of these 4 different learning personalities.